And we are. I just got to get my camera started.
We're not yet, are we?
And we are live.
Oh, we're live. Okay,
we are live. We're going to jump right into it. In some places, they said we're going to start at 11. Everything was scheduled for 11:30. So I thank Peter for being flexible and jumping in here today. So as he adjusts the background.
Well, I want to make sure that we look good. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't know if there's that many filters, but that's all right. Peter, good to see you.
Scott, buddy, how are you?
I am great. Thank you for joining me here on Amazon Live.
Amazon Live, this new adventure you have.
That's right. Yeah. And so for those people who watch, unmute, follow, share, because we're doing this author interview series. So people that have books on Amazon, like Peter, and we saw it earlier. We got One Inspires Many, Be the One. And so we're going to talk about Peter's book, Peter's journey, and just life and interesting things, as we always do on these series. And so with that, why don't we just, Peter, tell us what's going on in your world, and then we'll go back into the journey of your book and so forth. But what are you up to right now?
Well, right now, I'm taking care of elderly parents, Scott, and I'm up in Wisconsin, back in my hometown of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Taking care of my mother and my stepdad, and then for 10 days prior, I was up in northern Minnesota with my wife and her dad, who's 93. These guys are all 92 and 93 years old. So this is not a part of life I never knew I would be doing, but I'm getting pretty good at it, actually. My sister said to me, "You're getting pretty good at this." I said, "Well, it's you do what you have to, right?" And when it comes to your parents,
yeah, they made sacrifices along the way for you.
Well, Scott, when you read my book, and you, I know you have, but my mother was a big influencer in my life after I had my accident, and so you could argue it's payback. It's not really, but it's she did a lot for me, and so what can I say? It's my turn.
Yeah. It's we were just visiting my wife's mother. She's going to be celebrating her 90th birthday coming up this fall. She's still in her home, drives.
My mom's at 93. She's at the grocery store, and she went swimming this morning to do her exercises. So keep her active as long as you can, because
active and at home. It just seems that that environment has a big impact on your health.
It totally does. And my father-in-law is now in a rehab center because he fell down and hurt his foot, and those facilities are not where you want to be. Yeah. I mean, they serve a great purpose, and for what he's going through, he'll be home again in 6 weeks most likely. But it's a sad. We're living longer, right? So people, we start to wear out. That's what it comes down to. Your body just starts to wear out. I don't know how to put it. And so, like you said, and I'm a big believer. I played pickleball this morning and did my exercises, and I'll ride my bike tomorrow, because you got to do it to stay active, keep parts moving.
Yeah. And that's what we just to kind of move back into your now or move over into your book
My
here.
book, yeah.
That yeah, you had your accident. You had an accident when you were in high school,
Yep.
but you had been an athlete, and so this is what you're doing now is really an extension of where you were way back. But maybe just talk about what it was like being a high school athlete and
Well, when I was, so I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is a small Midwest town, great place to grow up, and famous for the Packers, obviously. But the I was a swimmer in high school. I was a competitive swimmer, and I was not a big enough guy to play football, and I was no good at basketball. But I was a swimmer, and at the time, I swam for, I want to say, 6 or 7 years. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I was at the time the breaststroker. That was my stroke, breaststroke. I was the fastest breaststroker on the varsity team for the 100-yard breaststroke. I couldn't do butterfly, lousy at backstroke. Everybody can do crawl stroke, right? Freestyle. But, the guys that are fast are really fast.
mm,
And so my deal was breaststroke. But yeah, I lost my arm when I was 16. And you want the story now? I mean, I'm not sure this is.
hey, we're here. You bet.
You're you're funny
We're
too,
here, yeah,
Scott.
because you're as you said, you found a spot. You found a spot that fit for you,
Yeah,
which in this case was a niche within swimming.
and swimming in I swam at a YMCA, and we competed in.
Oop, we froze up here, so we'll just hang on for a moment because
And
let's see.
we,
Okay, there
we
you
just
go.
we,
Back.
yeah, I'm back. So
Yep.
we competed with other YMCA's, so there was always competition involved. And the one thing my coach was really big on, he wrote down your time every single event you raced in, and during the practice he'd write down every time you did for every time trial, because his whole thing was, did you do better than last time? It
Hmm.
wasn't did you win, it was was your effort enough to beat your time from last time. And he knew what your time was because he had it on his clipboard, and so there was no arguing with the guy. And all he wanted was, you could tell from his look immediately if you did good or not, right? And
Mhm.
so it's always trying to get your personal best, and that's just the way he coached. He was a phenomenal person and a great coach. He coached for 30 years at the YMCA with the kids in town. Everybody knew Clyde Trutman, and I actually did a tribute to him at his funeral because of what his influence in my life was, and I'll tell you that here in a second. But
And that's an interesting point because as I've thought about this and I've talked to other folks like yourself and the coaches that I had, and for some people it may not be a coach, might have been a particular instructor, could even be a neighbor or somebody that maybe taught you something, but the subject matter was more of a catalyst to teach you more about life.
exactly, yeah. And those are the best coaches out there, right? Because they're using the sport to teach life.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, at the end of the book, I talk about, be the one, be the one to inspire someone else, because as well as anybody that when you have kids, a coach can have a dramatic influence on a kid, good, bad,
Mm-hmm.
or indifferent, right? And
Exactly.
how they
Yeah.
treat them. And I have a good friend that teaches baseball, and he's an umpire, and he uses baseball to teach kids about life. It's not about the game, it's about life and playing together as a team to accomplish a common goal. And so I'm a big fan of a great coach, and I've seen coaches, and I'm sure you have too, where they're hollering at kids, and swearing at kids, and just destroying the kids,
Yeah.
self-esteem, and it's a sad, but they don't know what they're doing, I guess, is all I can say. They may know the
Yeah.
sport, but they're ruining the kid in the process.
One of the things, so for 7 seasons, I taught coached junior high track, and as I told the parents when they're coming in, at junior high,
Yeah,
it's
very.
just it's about experience, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
That's
I
what
mean,
it's all.
some of the kids were naturally gifted and they were fast or they were good jumpers or something, right?
Right, right.
And it's just natural ability at that age. But for me, a lot of it was just about experience. And so I actually created the Swifter, Higher, Stronger Award.
Good for
And
you. Good for
and
you.
yeah, so what we did is I had these little aluminum tags, little dog. Actually, they're dog collar tags, and then we put the Swifter, Higher, Stronger. And we put the Eagle track, and then the year of the season on there. And to earn the Swifter, Higher, Stronger Award, you had to compete at a meet in 4 different events, and they all had to include, one running, one jumping, at least one throwing, right? Because
whether you're good at it or not, you had to compete in all the different events.
Yep, they had to compete in 4 different events and include, those 3 major areas. And my concept was that, here you got these, junior high kids. They're 12, 13, 14 years old.
Sure.
That when they're 44 years old and they're sitting on the couch with their child next to them and the Summer Olympics come on and that athlete steps into the ring with a discus, they can turn to their child and say, I did that.
Yep. Cool. That's very cool.
Even if it was just that one time in practice where they know what it feels like. They know the weight of that thing, and when they spin, how it pulls against their hand. And
that's cool. Yeah.
This is what I wanted for them. And so let's go on. Let's talk about. So you're a high school teacher. You've got this great coach, and obviously we'll talk about how he's inspired you. And
so I'm a 16-year-old kid. I'm working a summer job. I've got my car. They got to pay for it because that's the way it was. If you wanted a car, you got to pay for it. So I worked at a local, at the local grocery store, and so I was learning to operate in the meat department, the meat counter in this grocery store, which is still here in town now, 50 years later. Austin's is the name of the store. And it's the one I worked at is actually closed, but the other one is still open. And I cut my arm off in a meat grinder, grinding up hamburger on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, I remember it. I still remember it vividly because I didn't pass out or anything like that. And there was a guard that's on the machine. If you're familiar with a commercial meat grinder, they're about the size of a desk, a smaller size desk, not these great big executive desks, but it's and there was a guard that prevented you from putting anything down the hole, which ground the meat up. Well, the guard was loose for several weeks, and somebody took it off one day, and I came to work. I'm 16, and it turns out that's underage for operating a machine like that.
Wow.
And I'm working with my boss. Jerry was the guy's name, and my once that auger goes around and catches your finger or a piece of meat, it just grinds it up. It doesn't let go. And I was pushing the meat with my left hand. I don't have my arm on right now, but I was pushing and catching it with my right hand, and the switch was back against the wall. And so when my arm got caught, obviously I screamed. I tried to reach the switch, and I couldn't reach it. But my boss, Jerry, was quick on his toes and turned the machine off. Otherwise, it would have ripped it off at my shoulder.
Oh boy.
And I don't know if I'm sitting here without my arm on. I mean, this is my my stump, and you can actually see here. I don't know if you want to see this, Scott, but there's a this is where the auger would have gone around one more time.
Yeah.
Right here, it was cut.
And so Jerry hit the switch, hit the quit kill switch,
and so I'm stuck in this machine.
Yeah.
And you can't pull out of it. And so I'm screaming pretty loud, like I'm gonna die and all that. But I'm bent over, I'm twisted up. The tray for the meat is stuck under my arm, and I'm staring at the floor, screaming. And he says,
"Yeah." When I read that part in the book, I mean, it's still just it gives me the willies, man.
It wasn't. Well, and most people I don't tell this much detail to, but we have time today to get into it. But anyway, they called the fire guys, and they came and they actually took the whole machine to the hospital because I was stuck in it, so I'm not bleeding. Everybody says you're probably bleeding to death. No, I wasn't, because of the pressure, tremendous amount of pressure, and I could still feel my hand I couldn't see. There was nothing. This is kind of gross. Nothing coming out of the machine. It was still hamburger. And they took the whole thing to the hospital. And this was 1968, Scott. There were no cell phones. They couldn't find my parents. So I remember hearing, and I had a brand new white shirt on. I'll remember this because I was going scuba diving that afternoon in Door County. I had all my gear in my car, and they cut off my brand new white shirt. I was really mad, and because
typical teenage boy.
I bought it myself, right? It was a brand new shirt.
Your money, yeah.
It was my money. It was my $6 probably back then, right? It was a lot of money, and so I heard my uncle or my aunt in the background. I didn't see him. I heard him put a needle in my arm, and before they took it out, I was out. And then they obviously performed the surgery, and you wake up in the middle of the night in the hospital, all bandaged up and not really realizing what happened, except my dad is sleeping in a chair next to the bed, and I don't want to say it's 2 or 3 in the morning. I got to go to the bathroom really bad. And so he takes me and holds me up because I'm really drugged and weak and all that. But anyway, it was quite a ordeal. But the story about the coach is that about 2 days later, he comes into the hospital to visit because obviously everybody in town heard about it, and it got around pretty fast. And so I'm laying in bed because I remember this vividly. I'm still not getting out of bed much, and I got my arm all bandaged up. I look up at him. He's on my left side here, and I say, I guess I'm not swimming anymore. His answer was, yes, you are. I'll see you in the fall.
Oh, my word.
That was it. There was no discussion. There was no conversation. In the olden days, you respected and did what your coach told you, right? Because I was 16, and you didn't argue and say I'm not showing up to practice. You did what you were told.
Yeah.
And so, this was in July, so I was back in the pool, and a lot of things happened between July and September as I got better and healed and all that. But I got back in the pool with this arm right here, and so. You don't go very fast, Scott, with 1.5 arms.
Yeah.
And so I was
stop for a moment and remind everyone we are interviewing Peter Schmitz, author of What Inspires Me to Be the One, and we were talking about his journey and coach there. And I've highlighted his book in the carousel there. I encourage you, click on the book and take a look. And
thank you.
And he's got a foreword by Mark McCoy, who's an Olympic gold medalist.
Yes. Yeah.
And
great guy.
This is. Yeah, quite a story. So you're in the hospital. You told your coach you're not going to swim. He says, "Get to the pool." You go to the pool, and
there was no discussion. I'll see you in the fall, which meant get in the pool. Yeah. And so it's so weird because you show up. I'm now going into junior in high school, so I'm 16, turning 17, and everybody's looking at me, right? Because they've never seen a kid with one arm. And how do you swim? And it doesn't work the same, obviously. And so my coach, because he's the guy that's black and white, either keep up or you move down. So he bumped me from varsity team to junior varsity to sub varsity to reserve, which is actually 8 and 9 year old kids, because I could keep up with them. And then And then this was in September, October, and then I got he and my mother helped craft a artificial swimming arm, and it was I have it upstairs actually somewhere I could find it, but it's a paddle and it looks just like a hand, and it goes on. It got held on with heavy tension nylons that you wear like compression socks.
Okay.
So that held it on, and so I learned to swim with that, and I worked my way back up to when I was a senior in high school. I swam a 100-yard breaststroke in the National YMCA swim meet. I qualified. That was my stroke. Yeah. But the funny part, Scott, is this: if you know anything about swimming, the rules are you have to touch with 2 hands at the same time at the same height. And I didn't do that obviously because I had a paddle, and so I got disqualified. And my coach, it was really funny because my coach had to go tell the guy he doesn't have 2 hands. That was pretty uncommon back in 1969, right? It's not common. It's very common today, but it's not.
The world has come a long way, at least.
Come a long,
not as far as we need to, but
a lot further. And so anyway, that was my claim to fame. And then I wasn't strong enough or fast enough to compete in college because it's a whole different ball game once you get to college. But the question came, as I was writing my book, Scott, and you'll understand this. Why didn't I quit? Why did I do that?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been easy because
I had a perfectly good reason to
you
not.
had a yeah,
And I didn't. Back then I did what I was told because my coach said you're going to swim, and
yeah,
I did like swimming that because I couldn't play basketball at that point or football. And I remember I was a cheer. I went to an all boy Catholic high school, so I was a cheerleader, and my partner was a girl from the all girl Catholic high school, and so
mm,
there was a point where I had to pick her up, right, like cheerleaders do, and stick her with my hook. I had a hook at the time in the ribs, but she became my girlfriend anyway, so it was okay. But it was just, why didn't I quit? And I didn't really ponder that, Scott, until I wrote the book.
yeah,
And I look back, and I had a perfectly good excuse to quit.
hmm
And I thank God I got back on the horse, and I thank God for my mother and Clyde Trutman, because they
hmm
helped me, achieve what I did, and it got me, back in the saddle. I wasn't as fast, but I was able to compete, and I had a lot of great events. We went to a lot of races, and I was an anomaly because I was a kid with one arm, but because it was fun, and the only part I can say is about. And I learned this when I was doing triathlons, actually, is
hmm
why do athletes that are injured keep doing it? And
yeah,
I've interviewed a bunch of them in my book in
hmm
chapter, I think it's chapter 7. Why do you do it? And they, because I can, because it's there, because, you know,
hmm
but if you ask them 3 times, you get to the heart of the matter.
yeah,
This. You got to ask the question multiple times.
hmm
And it was most often to prove to themselves that they're still a complete person.
yeah.
And that was a real revelation to me, and it is to some of these other guys that I knew as athletes, that to
Which I
prove
think is great. If you're in your 20s or 30s, and you have that kind of self-awareness. Did you have that kind of self-awareness when you're 17, 18?
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so. I was doing it because I did like swimming, and it was what I knew how to do. And I was
Yeah.
also a lifeguard at the YMCA. The YMCA was my life. I was there almost six days a week between
hmm
swimming and lifeguarding, and it was big part of my identity back then. And I
Right.
was so
And so with one arm, the YMCA did allow you to be a lifeguard
they did, Scott, and this was
because I'm
really
thinking again, 1969. I mean, it's a different world, and uh,
here's an interesting story though around that. So I'm lifeguarding, right, and we're teaching kids to swim, and one of the deals was they had to swim one length for this test. I think it was, one of the flying fish or shark programs that
okay.
remember those. But a lot of kids remember those
hmm
classes that you had to get through. But this young kid, and I can picture him, but I can't think of his name. He started to swim out into the middle. Now I had my hook on, and I was lifeguarding, and I he was out in the middle and started to go down, and my Jeff across the way dove in to get him, and I had my hook on, and I did not know at the time if I could get it wet or not, right? And Clyde was the aquatic director. He comes over and says, I think he said something like, "Don't worry about it," or maybe next time, go in after him, because he didn't yell at me, he didn't do anything, because like this is like you just said, back in 1969, the rules were a lot different,
hmm
and the kid was fine. I mean, he was scared, but he was fine.
Yeah.
And we sat at the side of the pool and talked for quite a while, but he was fine. And eventually, I used my arm in the water all the time. It was back then. It was like my brand new arm. I didn't think I could get it wet. And now, I have this. This one is the electric one. This is my electric hand, and this you
mm
cannot get wet. This would short out. But
hmm
anyway, so to your point, the days were different, and there were
Yeah.
no rules. You know,
Yeah. Because what I'm really saying is it's prejudice, right? I mean, it would have been just outright prejudice to say, "Oh, Peter, even though you're a strong swimmer, we can't have you in the tower because of this."
right? But I wonder if you could do that today.
Well, as I
I
say,
don't
the
know the
world
answer to that.
has changed, but I'm just thinking then it would have been legalized prejudice, or
So, so you talk about prejudice. When I had to get my license renewed at some point, and they wanted me to get one of those spinner knobs on my steering wheel because they didn't think
oh
I could
right,
tweak.
yeah,
So they
neck and
didn't think
knob
I could.
as we
Right.
called them in high school.
And they wanted me to have an automatic transmission. And I said no. I said I don't need that. I'll
Mhm.
show you. I can do just fine. And so these are all incidents throughout my life, and we can there's a lot of them where you're right, people thought you couldn't do stuff, and part of that, there's something inside of Peter that says, I'll show you, I
Yeah,
can do that. I showed
and to
up.
me that's
I bought a motorcycle once, and I went to the motorcycle safety class,
yeah,
right? And I've got my hook on, and it's holding the left handlebar, right? Because that's where the clutch is.
yeah,
And if I have to describe it, but when I move my shoulders, it pulls the hook open, but it would pull the clutch back. And the
okay,
guy looks at me and he says, "How are you going to do this?" And I said, "Watch me."
yeah.
And at the end of the class, 2 days later, he says, "I hope you come back for the advanced class. You were one of the best students I had."
That's great. But
Well, it
this
is
is
great.
again, to me, this is part of the inspirational part of your story. Is that obviously I can read the story, I can be moved by when you're in the grocery store, when you end up in the hospital, and these other aspects. But of course, I don't have that same experience. But the prejudice side, I think that so many people can relate to this, and that you're able to overcome what back in 69 may have been, I'll say, legalized prejudice, but I'm sure you experienced that
It, it,
uh, even today in 2021.
well, it's less today because disabled people are far more accepted today than they ever were, and they're out, and they're more active than they ever were.
Yeah,
And people have become more aware. I guess it depends a little bit on where you live to
hmm,
see how exposed you are to people with disabilities. And
sure,
in the world of disabilities, Scott, I'm very minor disability compared to somebody that has one leg or is in a wheelchair or is blind. I mean, because I've raced with all these kind of people, and they don't look at themselves as they're disabled, but for every one of us that's out there being active,
yeah,
there's probably 8 or 9 sitting on a couch somewhere that's feeling sorry for themselves,
sure, yeah.
because I've met those people as well, and it's
And people that
unfortunate.
don't have disabilities are doing the same thing,
Okay, I'm not going
sitting
to
on
pick
a
on
couch
those people. That's a different story.
because they lost their job, or they lost the love,
Any
or
number of things can
they
derail.
lost the lottery ticket. I don't know.
Right, right. But the disability thing is
Yeah.
fascinating because, yeah, people would want to baby you, and they say, I
Mhm.
give you an example. Recently we moved my mom to Green Bay, and the mover shows up because we were going to have him load the truck, and all the boxes and all the stuff is in the garage. And he says, how'd you get him out here in the garage? And he knows me. I have one hand. I said, I carried him. What do you?
Yeah.
What do you they don't. People don't assume you can do things that normal
Mhm.
people can. And there's many. I'm not saying I can do everything because I can't. But there's not much I can't. I can lift the box. I can lift the TV. I can lift pretty heavy stuff. The hook that I have is will support my body weight. I mean, it's really
Mhm.
strong. So there's not much I don't do. And you know me because we've met and stuff. I now have 12 different arms.
Yeah.
So how many do you have, Scott?
I got a pair.
I'm
One,
I'm I'm I'm
one
really
right.
sorry. Yeah, you
Yeah.
only got two. I got 12, and so I have attachments for pretty much every sport there is that
Yeah.
I want to do, or need something different than the
Yeah.
hook.
So let's talk about kind of this evolution, because your coach said he made one for you,
Yeah, that
and
was
he
the
used
swimming arm.
compression sock to hold that on, and you competed with that,
So
and
that
then
was
after
my
high
that was
school.
my that was my first second arm. Actually, my very first arm, Scott, is buried in the bay here because I lost it water skiing the summer after I got my arm. And the
Okay.
reason I lost it is because the hook is, is stainless steel in it. I hooked it over the rope, the
Mhm.
handle, and I'm trying to slalom ski because that's what my brother and I did. And I said, hit it. And, he kept going, and my arm literally, I fell, and the arm didn't let go, and it just ripped it off and sank. We went scuba diving for it for 2 days trying to find it because, it was a pretty big mistake, if you will. And so
Yeah, yeah.
because of that, I've had several different water ski hooks
Mhm.
because I didn't want to lose another arm water skiing as I
Yeah.
grew up. And I don't water ski much anymore, but I do have a special rope. And it's Scott, you're a clever guy. It's ingenious because it's a, the handle of a rope, and it's a T.
Uh-huh.
Most ski ropes, the ropes come out to the end of the handle and hold it, so you're holding it in the middle.
Right.
This one, the rope is right smack in the middle, and it goes to the boat, right? So when I hold it on the outside, when I let go of one, the handle just turns and my hook slides off.
Oh,
It's
I see.
ingenious. And the guy that came up with the idea was the guy that helped me make a motorcycle attachment for my Harley, which was another crazy story because one arm guys, Scott, should not ride a Harley. I'm just telling you, it's
Well,
not the one of the biggest. The people who have lost a leg,
yeah.
the majority of them are motorcycle accidents.
Yeah.
The majority, not all, but and I've met
Well,
many
and
people.
it's, we hit this nice weather, these spring days, early summer days, and it's
It,
warm. And I see these guys roll. And when I was young, 18, I had a
yep, yep,
motorcycle, and I
yep.
see them now,
Who?
and you kind of get that yen, and then I hold back and I go, I got a mortgage in a minivan.
Well, and you got kids to take care of. Yeah, and
You know, yeah,
it is a great sport, and when riding through the country on a Harley was awesome,
yeah,
totally
yeah.
awesome. But it was
Mhm.
stupid. It was stupid because it's a definitely. So anyway, that was my water ski story. So I've had several different golf attachments to learn how to
Mhm.
play golf. I learned to play golf in my 30s, and I started with my hook, which does not hold on to a golf club very well, and I got a
Mhm.
device that slides over the golf club, and actually got a hole in one once. So
That's good for any golfer.
what for any guy? Well, it was a good shot, but it was still pretty lucky, right? I can't claim, you can't plan on those. But golf is fun. I still play once in a while. I don't play much as
Mhm.
anymore. And then what else do I have? I have three different hook arms now,
Mhm.
different for different purposes. And I've got an exercise arm that I use 5 days a week in the gym. And pickleball. I got a special. They make a device, and they snap into the end of my arm. There's the plastic arm that goes on, and then the devices go in the end, and it snaps on. It's designed for a softball, so it holds the pickleball really well. And so
Okay.
pickleball is
Yeah.
my latest activity, and I played this morning. So it's
It's very popular.
it's very
Uh,
popular, and it's a great social sport. And everybody, so I
yeah.
showed up. I showed when I first went to play pickleball. People look at me like, "How are you going to do this?" And I had my hook on because I
Mhm.
didn't have this. And so dropping and throwing the ball with the hook is not as easy because you got to get it to let go just right. So then I got this other device, and I can keep up with most people. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so
And
it's
so
yeah,
it's
they'll
a
make you anything you want.
yeah.
Anything you want. There's a catalog of parts. There's got to be 300 different items that they'll make. I mean, I told you, you and Travis, they actually make a guitar pick that I could put in my end of my arm and pick a guitar.
And play, yeah.
Yeah, and so
That's marvelous.
and,
That's
for hunting and I mean for archery,
Mhm.
every kind of sport there is. There's a guy, somebody in Colorado that came up with all these
Uh-huh.
devices, and they're reasonably priced, and they're heavy, hard plastic, so it's really pretty cool. So
Yeah.
there's no excuse in today's world to sit on the couch.
Yeah.
You could get as many arms as you need, Scott, if you ever lost one of yours.
Yeah.
I
If you
don't I
so
don't
it,
wish that upon you though, buddy.
I appreciate that,
I
but
don't wish that upon
I'm grateful for the creativity that people have,
you. It's
and
remarkable. It's
and able to
remarkable.
do that. And then so after high school, after you finish that last race and were disqualified um, at the state level, then so what did you do with your athletic life then? As you
I
were to
became
go?
a ski bum. In college. I was a ski instructor, and I was the director of the ski school at the University of Wisconsin for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I got very active in skiing, which was, I'd skied before with two hands, and so learning to ski was pretty easy. I have a special attachment, not a special attachment. I use my hook, but the cable on my arms hooks onto the top of the ski pole. So when I pull back, the pole goes forward. Like, so when you're going down the hill and you're,
Oh yeah.
pushing your pole forward, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so I was a big skier for a lot of years, but I didn't swim anymore. I mean, other than for recreation and for exercise. I played racquetball in college. I tried tennis, but I had the same problem. Throwing the ball up with my hook was pretty challenging. I mean, I did it, but it wasn't inconsistent. Is what I want to say.
Well, a lot of those sports, it is about the consistency. I know your golf and so forth. Yeah.
It's you got to do it 1,000 times to get good at it. So and so I tried that, but I didn't do a lot of. I mean, I learned to golf in my 30s. I drove race cars for a while, and people didn't think you could do that with a hook and be on the track competitive. It's people. I just tried so many different things in my life. That's just like you did. There's, life was meant to be lived, and so go for it. And so, I didn't start the whole triathlon thing till I was in my 60s. I never heard of it till in my 60s.
Yeah. So let's fast forward into this triathlon. How did that come about? What was the catalyst for that?
It was a crazy chiropractor that I was going to. He was an Ironman guy. And if you know any Ironman guys, many of them are just nuts, right? And they want everybody in the world to go do a triathlon. And I said, what do you, right? I mean, he was relentless.
Mm-hmm.
And he got several people to go and try it. And some people did one and stopped and whatever. But I said, I can't run. He said, well, you can walk. I said, then that's not a race if you're walking. What's the point of that? And I said, I have a mountain bike. I don't have a bike. I says, well, you can run a mountain bike. Any bike will work. And I'm going like, so I'm like, he finally convinced me. And so so I started training, and I'm not a runner. Running was the hardest part to learn. Riding a bike, right? Anybody can ride a bike. It's a question of how fast you can ride a bike. And he says, well, you're a swimmer. He says, that's the hardest part. Everybody that is triathlete, that's the weakest part is, for most of them, is swimming. And I said, well, I can swim. I'm not afraid of swimming, except the problem is you're getting in lakes that are freezing cold in the spring, and you're wearing a wetsuit. I'd never in my life worn a wetsuit to swim. I've worn them to scuba dive,
right?
But never to swim.
Yeah.
And so he's got me training, on a trainer, riding a bike, and I'm trying to run. I mean, I couldn't run a mile when I started. I could not run a mile. I mean, if I ran, Scott.
What was holding you back from running?
There's
not
no
cardiovascular, because you had that.
But here's the thing. Do you run at all? Do you know anything about running?
I used to run.
Okay, so then there's a proper way to run and there's a wrong way to run.
Yeah.
And the majority of people, including myself, run the wrong way. You land on your heel, and all that does is put pressure up your whole leg and your knee and your hip joint, and so I didn't know how to run, and when you run like that, number one, you get sore pretty fast, and you're prone to injury. Well, I learned to run from a coach, and when I became a triathlete with the team I was on, she taught me how to run. It's called the Chi method, and you learn to run on the balls of your foot, so it operates like a shock absorber. And I trained more on running than anything else to get good, because in the triathlon sport, the runners are the ones that win. If you can't run, they'll catch you and pass you on the run, because the runners consistently are the winners. I was a good swimmer. I'd be one of the first ones out of the water, but if you can't run, they pass you.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, this guy, his name was Greg Cherney. Greg and I and Doug went to Galena, Illinois for my first race. And everybody said, oh, it's a great place to go. It's a little hard. There's a lot of hills, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I got a mountain bike. I can go up hills. And so we get there, and the night before we cruise the course in the car. Mm-hmm. And I want to say the bike ride is 12 or 15 miles. There's 17 hills And I'm
Okay.
talking hills where you can ski on them because they're skiing in Galena, Illinois. And so we're going, holy smokes.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is going to be really hard. And I'm going, I don't know if I'm going to get through this, but
Yeah.
so I get, so if you've seen a triathlon start,
Yeah.
how everybody starts running across the beach and tramples on
Oh
top
yeah.
of everybody in the water. So
It's
it's,
like lemmings, right?
it's,
Running into
yes,
the ocean. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so I'm part of the group, right? I got my swimming paddle on. I got my wetsuit on, which was putting a wetsuit on is just, and the water is 59 degrees. It might have been 60. It might have been, because I think the deal was if it was below 60, they couldn't swim and they were waiting for it to get warm enough to get, anyway. So I'm running across the beach with all these guys, I have no idea what I'm doing. And the water took my breath away. It was so cold.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm a good swimmer. And so I actually was hyperventilating, and I tried to grab onto one of the lifeboats, and they said, no, you can go over there and stand up, because the water, it wasn't very deep. And so I went over there and stood up, and I just sat there and just catch it. I was hyperventilating, and all the years of swimming, I've never done that.
Yeah.
And scuba diving, I've never done that. So I finally get my stuff and I get out of the water. Now you got to get out of the wetsuit. That alone is a challenge. And then I get on my mountain bike, right? And I can't get up the hills. And I got a mountain bike. And these people are passing me like crazy, and I'm going, what's going on? What are they? And no offense, but women are passing me, and I'm going, what's up with that? And I had no idea what I was doing. And so then I get to the run, and the first mile, Scott, is uphill, one of these hills, so anyway, the long story short is I was the last one on the course. I mean, it took me 4.5 hours to do a 2-hour race. When I got to the end, the only people there were my friends Greg and Doug. They were waiting for me. There wasn't a cup on the ground, but I finished. And they got my medal for me because I finished. And the police were following me to clear the course because they wanted to make sure everybody was home safe. And
Yeah. Right.
and as I'm coming in, right, people are leaving. They're going, "Attaboy, keep going," because they could tell I'm handicapped and blood. Keep going. And I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
But it was addictive. It's addictive.
I've heard that about triathlons, about these, we'll just call them extreme sports or ultimate sports.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, it's very, very, but, I'm reminded of back in, speaking of 1968, it was the 68 Summer Olympics.
Yeah.
And the marathon runner, John Stephen Okoye from Tanzania. And he was the very last finisher in the marathon.
Okay.
And there's a great, you can.
Yeah, no, that's still a great story. I remember the story. I'm trying to remember all the details.
You can look them up and watch that. I encourage people to do that because the narrators, he's talking about it. This talks about this interview that they have with him after the fact, because it's dark.
Yeah.
Everyone is
right.
Everyone is out of the stadium. People are leaving the stadium, and his leg is bandaged, and he's hobbling and walking, and trying to jog a little bit.
Yeah.
And they said, why didn't you just quit? Just like, you had a reason to quit. When you're in high school and got caught in the meat grinder, he said, my country sent me 3,000 miles to finish a race, not to start the race.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well said. That gets me. Because you're.
Yeah.
So here's the continuing story, Scott. So that was in my first race. That 4.5-hour race was in like the end of May or early June in Galena. And the next, so why did I go? I went and got a mountain bike, or a mountain with skinny tires, and I get on this bike and I immediately crash into the building. Mm-hmm. I couldn't ride it, and so they modified the bike for me. And you clip your feet into the pedals. Well, if you don't know how to unclip, you just fall over. Well, I did that a bunch of times, right? Until I learned how to.
Having mountain bike myself a bunch, and I used to do mountain bike racing. And I remember the first time I put on those clipless pedals, and I'm going about 1 mile an hour through my backyard, trying them out, and then I stopped.
You just fall over. You just fall over. It's so frustrating because you're going, and you can't get your foot out. It's like there's nothing
And I'm
you
glad I did it where people weren't watching.
right. Well, they were watching me more than once, but I learned that somebody says to me, no, you got to go practice. Go hang on to a stop sign, and just clip and unclip, clip and
Yeah.
unclip, because you got to
Yeah.
anyway. So,
I
but
use the fence.
exactly, and so I learned how to do all that. But I went to my second race, and it was in Wakanda, Illinois, where I lived at the time,
Mm-hmm.
because we had a nice lake there, and swimming in the lake the water was much warmer. But at 6 o'clock in the morning, there's these people in the corner of the the preparation area, and they're all in wheelchairs and stuff. And I go over and I say, "What's going on? Who are you guys?" And the woman, her name is Carrie Sirota, says, "We're Dare to Try." And she's normal. She's the one she's like the coach and the leader. She says, "We help disabled people do triathlons. Do you want to race with us?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Sure." Because number one, they get to go first. They don't have to run across the beach and get in the herd of people. And so I said, yeah, it'd be a lot better, right? You don't have to get trampled.
Okay. Yeah.
So I go with them, and I get down to the beach, Scott, and they announce that they always announce the disabled people, at least at the local events.
Mm-hmm.
And I start to walk into the water, and I get to waist deep, and I look, and there's nobody by me, and I turn around, Scott, and they're all being carried into the water.
Wow.
It blew me away. I mean, I was just like, oh my God. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't belong here. I'm not handicapped compared to these guys.
Yeah.
And they're in wheelchairs. Somebody's got one leg, and I know I didn't know all those, but I know a bunch of them now, and remarkable people. You
Yeah.
mean, imagine
Here for a second again. I just want to tell everyone we are interviewing Peter with his book, "One Inspires Many, Be the One." And we're up here at this, so you can see in the cover he's got "Dare to Try" on his shirt, and we'll talk about that. And I was just, as you're talking about these athletes being carried in, and I was remembering in the book here, and you're talking about to find the story of the athlete that was blind.
Yeah, it's God. Oh my gosh. The blind people are remarkable.
Yeah, James Gillard, right?
James Gillard. Yes, he's still racing this year. He's still on the team. He actually stayed at my house one year for the race in Wakanda. And great guy. And so when you're blind, just try to imagine you're in the water and you're tied to somebody. You got a guide. There's a guide with you, and so you're swimming tied to the guide. And a guide's not allowed to pull you, right? The guide is there to guide you. So
right.
they get, but you can't see a thing. And then they ride a tandem bicycle, right? So James is on the back, and the guide. I know several of the guides that were on the front, and so James pedals. And one year, this was in Pleasant Prairie. James tandem bike, they had 2 flat tires. And the third tire they got to work, and no, they actually walked the bike a mile or two from where they got their last flat tire into the transition area, and then went out on the run. And the girl, Lindsay, I said to her, "Why didn't you get help?" And she said, and I interviewed her in the book. She said, she will endure more pain for him to finish the race than she ever would for herself.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? She said, Peter, when you're there to help someone finish, just like you said about the guy from 1960, he's there to finish, and I can't be the one to say you're not going to finish. So she kept going, and then they went out on the run. And James is a great guy. He stayed at my house, and this is kind of a funny side story. So he was sleeping down the basement. We had a basement in a bed in the basement. So I show him where the bathroom is, turn on all the lights, right? Which don't matter. I take him down the basement, and I says, do you need anything? He says, no, I got it. He says, no, I can find my way back. I'll meet you in the morning. And you know what they do? They count steps.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable. And he's up there in the next morning ready to go. And I get home that afternoon. I go down the basement. I go, why are the lights on down here? And because I had turned them on the night before.
Yeah.
And he never needed them. It was like, Peter,
Yeah. Right,
but anyway,
Yeah.
And James does more races than almost anybody because of he just loves to do the whole
Mm.
thing. And he's
Yeah.
not the only one that's blind. Alberto is blind, and they're just remarkable people, and they adjust.
Mhm.
We went to a wake of one of our fellow athletes, and we walk in one end of this big building, and we walk all the way around to the back where it is, and we're leaving after a couple hours, and I say I need to go to the bathroom, and Alberto says, well, there's one by the door where we came in. I said, how do you know? You can't see. He says, I heard the toilet flush when we came in. Now I was with him when I came in, right? And I never,
Right.
that doesn't register to you or
Sure.
me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Alberto knew from the sounds
Mhm.
what was going on. And so it was just fascinating to get to know some of these guys. And,
Mhm.
and you know me, Scott, I'm not shy. And
Right.
so I would ask, we would talk about stuff, right? And
Mhm.
and we were out in Martha's Vineyard. Was it Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket? I forget which, Martha's Vineyard, and doing a race. And I was with two military guys, a guy and a girl. Both had their legs off. And so we're the three disabled people, and they called those guys up on stage to acknowledge them because they're military vets.
Yeah.
And so I say to them, and it was really touching. I mean, it was really cool because people, clapped, and they deserved the recognition. They were Iraq vets.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
said to him later, I said, because we're having a beer, I said, how did you lose your legs? And they said they both lost them on motorcycles. Now they were in active duty,
Yeah.
they were in the military, but they were not. It was not, war
Yeah.
like
So
you
it
would
wasn't a
assume. And I said to
yeah.
him, and this is me again being kind of more direct than I should be. My wife would cringe when she I said, well, why don't you? Then how can you get up there and be recognized if you lost your leg in a motorcycle? And they said, Peter, this was really the guy says, Peter, we used to do that, and it would deflate the people trying
Mhm.
to acknowledge your service to the country.
Yeah.
And so she said we stopped, saying people don't typically ask how'd you lose your leg, right, or your
Right.
arm. They most people don't ask,
Right.
and so she said it wasn't um, appropriate or nice to say it was a motorcycle because I met another guy that's in a wheelchair, Howie. He's actually training now for the Olympics in Tokyo,
Mm.
in Colorado Springs, and he got hit on a bike twice and paralyzed. But he was a Scott. He was a Army Ranger paratrooper.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yep.
I mean, you don't get any better than that in the
That's
Army, right? That's the
yeah.
top of the line, and it's
Yeah.
and he got hit once on his bike, and he recovered, and he got hit again, and he's in a
Mm.
wheelchair. He's got the greatest attitude in the world.
There was a friend of mine. We were in high school together, and then started college together. We were roommates, and he ended up joining and going through Ranger school and jump school. Yeah, so airborne Ranger. He was in light infantry,
Yeah.
and I remember midway through his career, because he did retire as a major in Iraq,
Oh wow. Okay.
but
That's
but uh, but when he was a captain, I remember him telling me, he goes, "Yeah, I go camping a lot in my profession."
I'm sure he does. So Howie's deal was he jumped one time with his buddies in it. I don't think he was in his wheelchair, but from his wheelchair. I don't know how he
Yeah,
landed. I never heard the rest of the story, but yeah, he was a character. He was a
and there's
character.
something about there's just something about athletic competition that is in general inspiring. I mean, this is why the Olympics are so popular, because it's
Oh,
not just the competition; it's the story,
it's the story.
and that the athletes. And a number of years ago, I was in a Spartan race, and for those folks
Yeah.
that don't know about Spartan races, basically it's like a 3K, a 3 kilometer run, but it took me 2.5 hours.
Yeah. There's a
To-
lot of obstacles along the way,
there's
right?
obstacles along the way. You got to crawl under the barbed wire, and you got to climb the wall, and you got to carry heavy things around.
Yeah,
And
that's one thing I have not tried, Scott. You got me on that one.
I think you would enjoy it. There was a military veteran that was there with a couple of his buddies, and he was a double amputee, and
Oh
so
well.
had lost his legs. And his family, I remember his daughter, who was probably 5, 6 years old, was there, cheering for her dad with the family, and his buddies were on the course with him. And I mean, he was competing the full course. And they don't make allowances.
No, they don't.
The
No,
course
no.
is the course.
Of course,
And this is the one thing that as a family we like to watch, the American Ninja Warrior
okay,
competition.
that's a great one. Yeah.
And one of the things I like about it is that tall, short, man, woman, young, old, it's the same course.
Yeah.
They don't have the women's tees, right?
There's no disabled course, right?
The course is the course, and I just these are some of the things I appreciate about that.
So
So this man was competing, and I know your coach would have told him the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
like, are you doing what you can do? Because if you look around and you compare yourself, and this applies on so many levels, if you compare yourself to others, there's no way to win.
No,
There's always going to be someone faster,
right.
richer,
Always.
smarter, whatever it is. And so we always lose in comparison.
Well, that doesn't work in anything, as we know, but that's a maturing process, right? Not everybody learns that at a young age, and so
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole triathlon thing was a very big learning experience, and I'm in case you can't tell, I'm kind of competitive, and so I like to win. And so,
Well, I want to tell people, click on the book right here in the carousel. It's the featured item in the carousel. Click on it. The book is really well written, and I know it's a very personal story, and that we've talked in the past about that was a challenge to share your story. And I think you told me too about the first time that you really did share Peter's story.
yeah, it was. I was 50. Wasn't that long ago, really. It was hard.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a few groups, and when you're live and in person, it's a whole different story, because it's an inspiring story, and I've learned that people like those stories and they get something out of them. And however I can inspire someone, it's fine. Because I just was telling a guy this morning, because I gave him my copy of my book, My Chiropractor. I said, you don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to go inspire someone today. It just kind of happens. Either they're inspired by you or they're not, and you cannot, intentionally go inspire someone. And so that's where the book. My mother said, why did it take you so long to write it? And I said, because I didn't think it was that great a story, and who would care? And I know I had help writing it, but it turned out to be a pretty good story.
Yeah.
And so but the balance of the story, Scott, because I am competitive and I do like to win. And so the triathlon story was a 6-year journey from being the slowest on the course. In 2018, I won the Chicago Triathlon in my age group, 65 plus, and my disability group. So that was, my knees gave out shortly thereafter. But you learn, and the reason it's an addictive sport for a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, is because the jazz is just incredible. Yeah. And our coach used to train us, you gotta train to be in the pain, because it hurts. I mean, when you're running those last mile or 2 miles, it hurts a lot. And you gotta know that you can endure the pain for the duration, and you train for that. And most people in life don't ever train for that. And I'm not going to tell you I did until I did the triathlon. So we learned. When you're riding your bike, the course was anywhere from 12 to 20 miles, depending on the race. And how much pain can you endure for the next 50 minutes? And you cranked it in, because if you overdid it, this is one thing I never understood. She says, Peter, I was doing a half Ironman. She says, you got to back off on the ride. If you kill it on the ride, you won't be able to run. And I go, what are you talking about? She says, you won't have any gas in the tank. You won't be able to finish the run. And so she guided me on backing off to a certain level, and I finished the race. But these are all, that's why triathlons in any sport, really, if you apply, is a big lessons in life, big
Right.
lessons in life,
Yeah.
and you've learned them yourself. But I like to tell people, and I'll stop talking about triathlons because I could talk about triathlons for a long time, and I haven't run one now in 5 years, but I still ride my bike and I still work out. The jazz, Scott, at the
Hmm.
starting line is incredible.
Yeah.
When we were in the water, we'd get in the water. The disabled group would get in the water, and depending on the race, it'd be somewhere between 5 and 30 people. But when you're all just waiting for that bell to ring, it just it's hard to describe. It's like a horse in a starting gate. They just got all this pent up energy ready to go, and I used to just love that because you'd be right at the gate, and when the bell goes, all I said to myself was, "Do what you train for."
Yeah.
It wasn't. I didn't look at the guy next to me except to make not hit him. You don't want to run into people, but
Yeah.
aim at the tower down the way and swim as hard and as fast as you can to get there, and do what you train to do. And if you learn, like the whole running thing, I learned to run efficiently. I mean, I wasn't, but I got faster. I wasn't ever really fast, but I got faster. And this is true of life.
Hmm.
Training, and when you go to the gym,
Yeah.
instead of working out, if you go to train, it's a whole different mindset.
Yeah. Well, and that's what again, this goes back to the coaches,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and now that in a way, so even in this interview, you're coaching other people, so
well,
you're giving them more information, more life value than just how to run a marathon.
and on that one note, I'm going to tell you what Stacy taught me. Stacy was my coach in triathlons, a great
Yeah.
woman. Great, she coached a lot of she loved disabled people. But I'm running, right, and I'm running. You'll appreciate this. I'm running 3 miles, 3K in 30 minutes. So I'm a 10-minute pace, which is no big deal, right? You know that. Most people don't. She looks at me, she gets nose to nose, and she says to me, and I tell her I'm doing this over and over. I'm getting 30 minutes, 60 or 3 miles by. And she says, she looks at me right in the, she says, "You're training to be average." And I said,
Wow.
I said, "What?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, I can run the whole way now. I used to have to walk. And she says, "You're training to be average." And
Wow.
she said, if you want to get faster, let me
Mhm.
train you. And I still swear at her for that lesson, but she taught me the drills I needed to do to run faster, right? And you know
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. There are sprints and this and that. And
Yep.
I my best was a 7-minute mile on an indoor track, which was for a non-runner not bad. But I was actually doing that with Melissa Stockwell, who was second in Rio in the para triathlon. She's
Mhm.
part of Dare to Try, one of the founders, and she's training in Colorado Springs now to go to Tokyo. She's 35 with 2 kids, the first woman ever to lose a leg in Iraq. Her Humvee
Oh
got
my
blown up.
word.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, I say that because you're training to be average,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, Scott, you know this. Most people, that's what they do,
Hmm. Yeah.
regardless of the sport, regardless of the business activity. They don't learn. They don't get a coach to push them to do something different, better, faster, whatever it is,
Right.
and they stay average. And I still tell that story. I still do short videos of it on Facebook and YouTube because it was a powerful message. And I remind her of it, and she says, she laughs now, but she says she forgot about it, right? Because it's a coach, right? She says she's got things. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
she said to me one time, this was after my second or third race with Dare to Try, and I'm still wearing my paddle to swim. And she says, those paddles aren't allowed in the water. And I said, "What do you mean they're not allowed?" It's my swimming arm. She said, "Attachments are not allowed in a USAT triathlon race in the water. It's a safety precaution. You might hit somebody.
Hmm.
And the guys with one leg can't wear a swimming leg or something like that." So she says to me, "I will train you to be just as fast without it as you are with your stump." I said, "Get out of here.
Yeah.
No way." And you know what she did? She trained me.
Yeah.
Trained me. And I could tell you how she did it and what we did, because it when I did it right, and it was like an arrow going through the water.
Really.
Yeah, and I was when I got it all together. I was just as fast.
Hmm.
So the good
That's-
coach, going back to the coach, Scott, you know
Yeah.
this, and we've all had good ones and probably not so good ones. They make an enormous difference in your life because otherwise you're training to be average. I love
Yeah.
that line.
Yeah.
I love that line.
It doesn't seem like someone's aspiration, right? I just want to be
I
average.
just want to be average. I'm doing all this work. I'm training all this every week so I can be average. And then, but
Yeah.
then,
But that is
Scott,
the difference. That is the difference.
I had to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to win,
Mm-hmm.
it was I did the work because in the disabled groups there are no age categories. So I would race at 60 plus against guys that were 30 years old.
Right.
Same arm off. There's a guy on the team that had the same arm accident. I mean, his arm was off, different accident, but he has lost his left hand just like me. And I wanted to beat him.
Yeah.
He beat me sometimes, and I beat him sometimes. But I beat him in the last race that mattered.
Yeah.
He beat me in the one prior to that, which really pissed me off. And so that's why I trained even harder.
And that's part of the beauty of the races too, is the friendships that you build. Because when I was doing the mountain bike competitive racing, you go to venue and you'd
Right.
see the same folks and develop friendships and that's part of the and then you're competing again. I mean, it's still competition.
It's still
They're your
competition.
friends, but
Like you said, the race course is the same. So I'm going to tell you this one last story because this guy's in my book. Hector.
Yeah.
He's got one arm off at the shoulder, and one arm off like mine.
Hmm.
And he's in a triathlon. And he shows up at the Chicago Triathlon at 6:00 in the morning, and I go over and I said, "How are you going to do this?" I talk to a lot of people. I mean, I'm friendly and outgoing. And he says, "I'll show you." And his bike is modified. He can run, obviously. He swims on his back, frog kick, and holds his hand up here because he can't paddle like you or I would.
Right.
And he's almost just as fast as I am with his frog kick on his back. And because he's really well trained. But anyway, and then his bike, he's got his stump slides into a sleeve so he can steer. He shifts with his chin. He's got electronic shifters, and his brake is down between his knees. When he squeezes together the handle, it works the brakes. And I was like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And his story is, Scott, he was he worked for Florida Power and Light, and he was in one of those bunkers, and he got electrocuted twice in the same day. He was left there to be dead, and he recovered. And he does a triathlon. He's still doing this to this day. This is 6 years that I've known him. No, it's more than that. It's about 8 years now, because I just saw a post of his. He gives a medal to a kid in the Broward County Hospital every week, because you get a finishing medal every time you race. And I don't know if he wins in his category. He might, but we always get a ribbon with a medal. And they're actually pretty nice medals because they make them unique to the race, right? They have they're identifying. And he gives it to a kid in the Broward County Hospital. So there's, like you said earlier, just amazing. I miss the people more than anything because the stories are incredible.
Yeah.
I get inspired by guys like that, right? Because he's just like, I mean, how do you do that? and James, who does this blind, he's been doing it for 8 years.
Yeah. Well, this is fabulous, Peter. I appreciate you taking time.
Oh, it's fun.
This is Peter's book. One Inspires Many. Be the One. It is.
And I want to tell you where that came from. If you open up the inside of the cover, I believe it says "Dare to Try," and Dare to Try is the organization founded in 2011 by Carrie Sirota and I just mentioned her name, Melissa Stockwell. And the goal was to help disabled people do a triathlon. And like you said, Scott, just do it to get the medal, to say I did it, because it's a tremendous confidence booster. Tremendous. Can you imagine the little kid that's been in a wheelchair and he's never done anything? Right. And now they just finished a triathlon?
Yeah.
That's just remarkable.
You know,
This one guy who was his first race in Wakanda years ago, and I remember this
huh?
because there was fog on the water, and he had a guide, and I missed the last buoy. I turned in too soon,
Hmm.
so I won the race, and I said that, and my coach said, "Did you make the last buoy?" And because they watch, right? My coach Stacy was watching, and I said, I got out there, and she said, "You missed the buoy," and I said, "You're right." She says, "You didn't win." I said, "You're right, I didn't win," and he won the race because he finished properly,
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
and he was so excited. It was worth not winning, and I like to win, but it was worth not winning to watch him. He was all over Facebook. I won the race. I did that. It was just so cool to see.
Well, and that's good. And you talk about the confidence, So if that child did grow up in a wheelchair, um, and we talked about the prejudice, right?
Oh,
And being told what you can't do, and maybe what you should do, and then to compete and finish a triathlon, and basically figuratively thumb your nose at those who say you
you
can't.
can't. Well, and what we don't know is the rest of the story,
Mm.
right? Because take the kid that won the Wakanda race, or take one of these little children, because there's a child's race series as well. And what do they do next? We don't know. We don't know. But
Right.
they could go back to being regular, or they could go back and do something else. Realize that there's nothing holding them back except
Right.
their mindset. It's all up here.
Hmm.
All you know that, buddy. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know all this. You could be doing this interview the other way around.
Well, it is so it is an inspiring story, and I do encourage people to click on the book, take a look at it, and my recommendation, of course, is to add to cart and read this summer. It reads quick. It's well written. It's a
Thank
great
you.
story. You're going to meet some fabulous people inside the covers of the book. One inspires many, and be the one. But I encourage people to find those opportunities
Yeah.
where you can overcome some obstacle, something that people told you can't do. Because
Right.
I guarantee you that everybody has been told sometime
Right.
you can't do this, and find the thing that you can do, and then figuratively you can just thumb your nose at them.
And Scott, that's where "Be the One" came from.
Hmm.
It was one inspires many. So when the Dare to Try thing is, we inspire many people to go do a race, but be the one to do that. Like you just said, be the one to provide the encouragement. Be the one to help someone beyond their limitations, because it's often all it takes is like my coach saying, you're training to be average. That got me going. You
Hmm.
never know. This is the crazy part, great Scott. You never know when you're going to inspire someone. You
Correct.
never know. I mean, I've gotten messages like, that I inspire them, and I go, I barely know them. What are they talking about? But that's not how it works. It's they're the ones that get inspired by my racing, or could be anything. Watching the kid, like the Olympics, people get inspired by that stuff. Be the one, and
Yeah.
you just and stop being a coach that yells at kids, for God's sakes. That doesn't, that's the part that,
Yeah, it's boy, I tell you,
yeah, that's another story. That's another story.
it's yeah, but um, and whether you're working with children, or you're working with adults, you're just working with the family, or maybe you're looking in the mirror. um,
It's
you
that's a
know,
hard one.
find that inspirational time.
Yeah, and I would say I want to finish maybe up with this little story, because one of the parts of my life, and this might apply to a lot of the listeners, is be resourceful.
Hmm.
Be resourceful. And my the story when my mother came in the hospital, and I wrote the book, the first chapter, and I sent it to my mother, and she said, "That's great, Peter, but that's not the whole story." I said, "What do you mean? It's what I remember. I remember everything." She says, "No," and this is in the first chapter. She said, "You were coming back from operation, and there were people around, and because people had heard what happened to Peter, and some of your friends were there." And she remembered a couple. Larry was there, and John Bumgart, and she said, there was a kid selling newspapers. And I said to her, get a newspaper. I want to see if I'm in the newspaper. Now, this is the story I do not remember. And this is 50 years after the accident. She says to
Wow.
me, I got you a newspaper and I gave it to you, and I couldn't open it because I didn't have two hands. How do you hold a newspaper with two hands?
Wow.
Without
Yeah.
with one and so she said, this is in the book, in her own words. She leans over and says, you're just going to have to figure it out, and leaves the room in tears. Now, I don't remember that, Scott,
Yeah.
but I have lived my entire life just
Mhm.
figuring it out. And that's why I have 12 arms, right? Because I'm figuring it out.
Right.
And I just got a pickleball arm a year ago, right? I'm still figuring it out, right? And all my point is, you can figure it out, meaning the audience here, because there's always, if you want it bad enough, for whatever the reason, whether you want to prove it to yourself like I do, or you want to prove it to your spouse, to your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, you can figure it out. You can learn to run, right, Scott? Anybody with a good coach, you can learn to run. Yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit because you don't know how to do it. You know, when you play golf, you get a few blisters, right? It's no different. It's just a different. You have to want it, and unfortunately, you know this. Too many people don't want it.
That's yeah.
I mean, they don't want it. The kids today are. We're getting off topic now. Anyway,
Well, I appreciate it, but there's a great story with your mom, and Peter, we will wind this one down. But thank you for today. So hang on here, and we'll get you in the green room, and then we'll chat after we.
All right.
But again, I just want to remind everybody, it's Peter Schmitz. One inspires many. Be the one, and just an inspirational story. Great conversation today.
It was great. It was fun, Scott. It was really fun.
This one on your mom. And so I'm just gonna put this one up so we can all see. There's the book. There's Peter. And so click on his book, add it to cart. You're going to be inspired this summer. And with that, I'm going to close this interview down. But next Wednesday, tune in because we've got more author interviews coming. And so this is D. Scott signing off for now.